And yet men find it in a stronghold. It arises out of the imaginations of men. It exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Man is, after all, something. You can't abase him. You can't put him on his face in the dust. There's a lot of worthwhile things about him. He has a lot of innate powers that he has retained. He's worth something. And we must give credit where credit is due. And this is the worth and value of the man, of man himself. That he is able to take the initiative, or at least offer his assistance and cooperation with God in the great work of salvation. If you have, any of you here tonight, have any inclination to adopt Arminianism, you must remember, number one, it is a system of thought. I have a theology at home, the whole dogmatics at home, written by an Arminian, where every point of the truth of the gospel is twisted and distorted in order to make it acceptable to those who believe in the free will of man. Very appealing, enticing, something we would easily embrace if we were looking for something that preserved some of our dignity and left us with something of our worth. Arminianism is a stronghold of Satan, strong and powerful, that defends those who accept it from, they think, the cannon shots of the gospel. Perhaps nothing is quite so much a stronghold of Satan as the wretched, godless, unbelieving theory of evolution. It arises out of man's imagination. You won't find anything in the Bible about evolutionism. You'll find the contrary. By faith, the author of Hebrews said, by faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. That's exactly the opposite. The author of the epistle to the Hebrews had evolutionism in mind when he wrote that, by the guidance of the Spirit. But it's a powerful system of thought, and it enslaves the whole world, almost the whole world, who hide behind the bulwarks of evolutionism to escape the clear and unmistakable doctrines of the knowledge of God. And if you insist on defending the truth of the creation of the world by the Word of God, oh, you're old-fashioned. You belong to another century prior to the time of science. You are, if not old-fashioned, bigoted, narrow-minded, unwilling to face the realities of science's discoveries. There's no place for you in this world where science is God. And if you will not come behind the stronghold of our system of theology, because that's what evolutionism is, then we have no place for you in this creation. Such are these mighty systems that have been present in the world and still are here today. So these that the apostle is speaking. And he is saying, you may say all you want to about my appearance among you. You may say all you want about my delivery. I don't mean to minimize the importance of an effective delivery in preachers of the gospel in seminary. We have emphasize that ministers must be good speakers. That it's a kind of a shame on the gospel when every other sentence has in it a grammatical mistake. And when the minister stumbles and stutters and doesn't know what he's going to say next, and makes a slovenly appearance when he appears behind the pulpit. The gospel is worth our very best efforts. That's not what Paul is talking about here. Our very best efforts when we bring the gospel in the preaching of the word. But, says Paul, criticize that on my part if you want. I'm not going to argue about it, that I don't have anything about me which makes me appealing to congregations. But I do preach the gospel. And the gospel which I preach is a gospel that pulls down strongholds, smashes the walls of all wicked philosophies and systems of thought to pieces, brings down imaginations, destroys and smashes the pride of men in their systems which exalt man over against God. The gospel does that. That's why I'm concerned about the gospel. That's all. Now, the question is, of course, what do we mean by the gospel? Well, in general, first of all, I want to call your attention to the fact that Paul is contrasting here the gospel with the systems of thought to be found in the world, which the world considers its strongholds, by describing the preaching of the gospel as a warfare which is not carnal. We do not war after the flesh, though we walk in the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. The gospel is not something human. Its power, its ability to smash the strongholds of the heathen is not human. Paul himself makes the distinction, not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. Our power is spiritual. In the second place, we ought to notice, I think, that one of the great ironies of the Bible, in my opinion anyway, is the fact that the greatest power that has ever been seen in this world is a power that from every outward appearance looks so insignificant and even foolish and impossible in what it claims to be. Paul calls it in his first epistle to the Corinthians the foolishness of preaching. Foolishness of preaching. Man gets up behind the podium on Sunday and he starts to talk. He's a weak man. He's probably not very gifted in his oratory. He has no charisma about him. There's nothing in his outward appearance that makes him appealing to men. And all he does is talk. People don't like that today. They complain about the worship services, 2/3 of which are a man talking. They get sick of that. And so they cut down shorter and shorter and shorter the time allotted to the preaching, and they give the preaching less and less emphasis until it doesn't exist any longer.